Guys, we have already covered our pre and post testing for exotic weapons. Today though, we are going to be looking at exotic armor pieces. Here we'll be diving into all the exotic armor changes for each of our classes. And let me just say, some of these has had some major overhauls. Now to kick things off, let's begin with our Titans. An exotic that needed some love desperately was Icefall Mantle. Now this actually had a ton of changes to it. You now gain a stack of frost armor for rapid stasis final blows, and each time you gain a stack of frost armor from any source, you will now heal for a small amount, which for this season and these artifact mods, this is fantastic. Now when activating Icefall Mantle's unique class ability, this provides max stacks of frost armor rather than the old custom overshield. This also no longer prevents sprinting or jumping abilities, and get this, it now works with the thruster ability equipped. Still does the same animation, but slower cooldown. Now your class ability energy now begins to recharge immediately after using Icefall Mantle's class ability, and upon activation, the burst of stasis energy freezes combatants and slows players. Now Bungie did, however, remove the bonus to stasis weapon damage, and this does require a stasis super to be equipped. So a lot of changes here, guys, but welcomed ones. Essentially, landing rapid stasis kills from any source, weapons, or abilities will grant you a stack of frost armor, up to a max of 5 stacks, which will last for 10 seconds. Now this can be increased to a max of 8 stacks with things like Whisper of Rhyme, which also increases that timer to 13 seconds. Now upon activating your class ability, any combatants in a 3-meter radius will be frozen, with players in PvP being slowed. It actually works pretty good. I had a guy push me the other day, I popped it, kind of like Backrus though, it gets a slow off, really messes up the enemy, making them easy cleanup. Now at the same time, you'll also gain max stacks of frost armor immediately, which can be refreshed by landing rapid stasis kills. Now the biggest drawback to Icefall Mantle previously was that it would limit your movement. That penalty has been completely removed. I know we're missing out on the extra stasis damage, but this is a great change. And what this exotic essentially is like Crest of Alphilupi, but with tanking capabilities. And that combination is perfect for survivability. It's a great pick for this season, guys. I urge you to give it a go. Next on the list is another stasis-focused exotic, Cadmus Ridge Lancecap. This exotic is focused on creating a ton of diamond lances. Now, Bungie removed the stasis weapon requirements. Now, any final blow or rapid precision hits while behind a rally barricade and with the stasis super equipped will create a diamond lance near you. Directly hitting any powerful combatants with a diamond lance will now create 3 stasis crystals, which used to only be reserved for bosses and vehicles. We actually made a video not too long ago using this inside of Trials of Osiris, and it was solid then. Now keep in mind, back then you could still make diamond lances when landing precision hits. You just gotta land 3. So if you're rocking things like a pulse rifle, 1 burst, all crits, boom, you've got a diamond lance to push up with. The difference with this one is that you don't have to get a stasis weapon final blow in order to create a lance. Say you get a body shot kill. That's fine. It could be with any weapon type, doesn't have to be stasis, and you'll still make a diamond lance. Now keep in mind, the ability to spawn 3 crystals only works on direct impacting a powerful enemy. So orange bar enemies or above, those will give you those 3 stasis crystals. Overall, guys, nice quality of life change here to Cadmus Ridge. Next up, we have Ursa Furiosa in Spirit of the Bear. Again, that's the exotic class item variant. Bungie has increased the maximum super energy gain for Unbreakable and PvE from 15% to 20% and fixed an issue where you were gaining more super energy from Unbreakable and PvP than intended. It now provides a maximum of 10%. Now you can see these changes on the screen, pre versus post, for both PvE and for PvP. But these also came alongside the changes made to the Unbreakable aspect itself. Now there's a ton here, but the big ones for PvE are that damage blocked by Unbreakable now generates grenade energy and increased max duration the shield can be held. These are very nice changes because while you are blocking damage using your grenade ability, you'll also be getting refunded that energy mid-block, as you can see here. And with a new taunting mechanic added to both Titan Barricades and Unbreakable, you could essentially hold your grenade forever. Now inside of PvP, a fully charged Unbreakable attack will also now one-shot barricades if they're not under the effects of Heart of Inmost Light. Next is Cuirass of the Falling Star. This is of course our Yeet exotic that buffs the damage of Thunder Crash. Now this exotic now has the ability to generate super energy on melee kills while amplified. Now you can see here, it's a small amount of energy, but kind of like Geomags and Onyx Traces, this is something that's going to feed back into your super, which is well worth it this season, guys. Thunder Crash is doing way more damage than what it's supposed to. You see, Bungie stated that they reduced the damage bonus from Cuirass to Thunder Crash from 2 times to 1.55 times. This was made alongside a change to Thunder Crash, increasing the base detonation damage by 33%. Now the intention behind this change was actually to keep the same damage values pre versus post. However, Thunder Crash with Cuirass is actually dealing way more damage, about 40-ish% more. We have a super damage testing video that's going to be rolling out, guys, if it hasn't already rolled out, and you'll see just how much damage our Yeet exotic is doing. Let me just say for my PvE players, if you're looking to dish out a lot of damage as a Titan, you need to be rocking this exotic. It's too good, man. The other change they made though to this exotic is that the overshield that you gain after making impact with Thunder Crash was replaced with a straight up damage resistance buff, that being 15% in PvE and 10% in PvP. There's a reason why people have been able to two-phase Atrax and Vespers hosts as a solo player, and it's because of this exotic. You can get back-to-back supers, literally 3 supers in a single damage rotation, which is a hell of a lot of damage. Next up, we have a very spicy one, that being Peacekeepers. These exotics got the Lucky Pants treatment. Rather than buffing hand cannons, this one buffs our SMGs. It reads that dealing damage to combatants with an SMG increases SMG damage for a short time, the maximum of 20 stacks, netting us 100% bonus damage. Now this lasts for 1 second, with each hit adding a stack and refreshing this timer. Fellas, this is a massive buff for Peacekeepers, because for the most part, people just used it for the increase in handling, which it still has. You paired this alongside the reworked Huckleberry, now that it has kinetic tremors, and hot damn, it puts out. Now keep in mind, the kinetic tremors on Huckleberry doesn't get the 100% buff, but everything else does. This is a very strong pairing, but there's also plenty of other SMGs to use with Peacekeepers. Whether it's Terraba, Wrist Runner, or your favorite legendary SMG, Peacekeepers is going to be picking up the damage substantially. And across the board, you're looking at that 100% increase at max stacks. The only issue is, of course, maintaining those max stacks, which is why weapons like Wrist Runner or even Huckleberry are probably your best bets, especially Huckleberry as it auto reloads. The last thing we need for Peacekeepers at this point, though, is just an ornament. Hot damn, these things are hideous. Next, we have Mask of the Quiet One. This also received a very strong change. Rapid final blows and final blows while at critical health will now grant Devour. Now, this effect does require a Void Super to be equipped, but essentially 3 rapid kills from any source or a kill while you're at critical health will proc Devour, which will last for 6 seconds. Now, this can be refreshed indefinitely by simply just getting kills, with each kill giving 5 seconds to Devour, up to a maximum of 10 seconds. This is a very strong change to Mask of the Quiet One, and it needed it, guys. This was a garbage exotic. Sexy, but garbage. Devour not only gives you health regeneration, but it also boosts your grenade regeneration. And with this change, Mask of the Quiet One is not only leaning into its survivability more, but it's also leaning into what it's supposed to be doing, which is netting you your abilities back even faster. Now, our next Titan exotic is Pyrogale Gauntlets. Now, this is a very short and quick one. Bungie essentially increased the cyclone damage by 10%. Now, as far as damage comparisons, again, we've got an entire video coming out, if it's not already out, going over the super damages and how they compare. But something that I need to mention though, when we talk about Pyrogale here, is that we notice when testing damage for anything that involves ignitions, they are currently bugged. As you can see here with Song of Flame, each ignition that we did gets lower and lower by about 50% each time. And it was crazy because we would start at 34,000 damage and it would get all the way down to like 800 something damage, which is crazy. Now, Thursday, Friday last week when we were doing these damage tests, a lot of people were coming by and saying, well, wait, what if this is an intentional change by Bungie? Listen, fellas, this is not intentional. It is a bug. If this was an intentional change, Bungie literally just killed anything that is solar related. Now, luckily for Pyrogale, the initial hit doesn't cause an ignition. It just does a flat number of damage. So the only damage loss you could potentially see is if the cyclones linger for long enough on that target. But considering how wonky these cyclones seem to be, that probably won't always be the case. So while yes, this change should hopefully buff up Burning Maul some more, the current state of ignitions do make it hard to recommend anything that's solar based, at least until Bungie addresses this issue. Now, the last exotic for Titans is for our exotic class item, Stoicism. Most notably, Spirit of the Horn now finally has the ability to synergize with Thruster. You can see it working right here, guys. When activating Thruster, this leaves behind a ball of solar energy that damages and applies Scorch to nearby enemies. Now, on top of that, you also have Spirit of Alpha Lupi and Spirit of Hoarfrost. They also have received changes to work with the Thruster ability. These are very welcome changes, guys. And if you take Alpha Lupi, for instance, I've been using this more and more inside of PvP, especially with Spirit of Ophidians, and I essentially have an on-demand heal bump, similar to like Worm Husk for Hunters. I've got the evasive nature of Thruster, the instant health bump, And then when I pair it with things like Ophidians, I of course have that increased boost to my handling speed for all of my weapons. This one little change, guys, has substantially elevated the value of Spirit of Avalupi, Spirit of Hoarfrost, and Spirit of the Horn. Now, before we get into the changes for Warlock exotics, we need to first talk about the changes that hit Spirit of Star Eater. You see, this perk for our exotic class items has had its effectiveness reduced for 3 supers in particular. Nova Bomb and Thunder Crash have had their benefits granted from Star Eater reduced from 70 to 50%, with Twilight Arsenal having a whopping benefit reduced to 25%. These are pretty substantial tunings here, guys. And when you look at the charts here for our damage testing, you see them right there where Star Eater hits. Now, is Star Eater and Spirit of Star Eater really good still? Absolutely. You see it here on Behemoth, guys, cranking up over 2 million damage. It's just for those 3 particular supers, things have been dialed down quite a bit. Now let's move on to our Warlock exotics. First, let's talk about Ballidorse Wrathweavers. Here, Bungie adjusted the Heart of the Ice perk to increase the shatter damage of frozen targets by Shadebinder super projectiles by 100%, regardless of who breaks them out, and they've added, quote, granting frost armor to your allies with Frost Pulse or Winter's Wrath will now grant you super energy. Now, it ranges in potency based on how many allies it is granted to. And it seems like a very standard buff, but something seems to be off here, guys. You can see here, pre-patch with Ballidorse equipped, that we hit Carl for a total of 172,211 damage with 1 shatter. But post-patch, we're only hitting Carl for 120,868 with a single shatter. Not too sure what's going on here, guys, but this was tested both with and without Whisper of Fissures equipped, and even the base damage numbers are the same, both hitting for 81,411 pre versus post. So for the time being, guys, we're thinking this one is bugged. Hopefully it's addressed soon because it should be doing a lot more damage. Even the other day when we did damage tests, you see it right here, guys. Shadebinder is awful. And this is in a season where Stasis is supposed to be meta. Next is a very exciting change for my Warlocks, and that's the change for Skull of Dire Ahamkara. This got a new ability added where weapon defeats while Devour is active grants super energy. Now this will range from 1% to 4.5% depending on the type of target that's defeated. Now guys, this is a huge buff. It still holds on to its original perk, being able to refund super energy on Nova Bomb hits, but with this change, this opens up super energy regeneration substantially. Take a look at how much super energy we're gaining while Devour is active. And this works with any super, by the way. It's not just Nova Bomb. Yes, it synergizes the best with Nova Bomb, but you can 100% use this on Prismatic with a variety of different supers and essentially use Skull almost as like a battery to generate super energy for any super. Then you can swap off to another exotic once you're full. Now, of course, the obvious weapon here that we want to pair is Bad Juju. With the rework that hit Bad Juju, this pairing is a disgusting one to do here. You could see the super regeneration at work between these 2 exotics. And even on Prismatic, just using it to get Song of Flame insanely fast and then swapping off to Spirit of Star Eater to get the boost to our super damage, this is an S-tier change to Skull. Next up is another exotic that got quite the buff, Sanguine Alchemy. You've probably been seeing people use Sanguine in the dungeon, and for good reason. You see, this marks targets you damage while standing in a rift. You deal 10% extra damage from any source against those marked targets, and on top of that, it provides surge ×4 to the weapons that match your super damage. Now, this is another very strong buff. For just literally placing down your rift, you and your teammates are able to deal 10% extra damage to enemies that you shoot. And you can see it right here, guys. When we shoot an enemy, they get the mark on them, giving us the signal that they will receive 10% extra damage. And if you have a weapon type matching your super, you'll gain that ×4 weapon surge. For example, here with Choir of One, we crit Carl for 13,334 damage. Then in a rift with Nova Bomb equipped, this goes up to 16,668 damage, which is a 25% increase over base. But since Carl is now marked, the following shots deal an extra 10% damage, cranking that up to 18,334. So that by itself is very impressive. And you can imagine in things like Grandmasters, where you always have a rift down, how beneficial this can be. But here's the thing, guys. It gets crazier when you consider that Well of Radiance is also considered a rift. Take a look here at Whisper. We're able to crit Carl for 93,560 damage at base. Then in a Well with Sanguine, this jumps up to a whopping 146,187 damage. But don't forget, now that Carl is marked, this jumps even higher to 160,805 damage. Fellas, this is a massive 72% increase over base. Sanguine has some very high potential for nuking bosses. You can imagine this with things like Parasite ×20 with that 72% buff, or a number of other weapons that would work here. For my Warlocks out there, I highly advise you try out Sanguine this season. Now moving along, we have Verity's Brow in Spirit of Verity. Now the first stack of death throws provides 40% grenade damage in PvE, up from 20%. grenades, with each additional stack now providing plus 15% grenade damage, up to a max of 100% at 5 stacks. Now the buff here, it checks out. You can see here that pre-patch, we were hitting Carl for a total of 37,569 damage. The death throw times 1 went up to 45,557 damage, which is about a 21% increase. Now post, we're hitting 40,198 damage at base and 56,321 damage at death throws times 1, which is a whopping 40% increase in damage. Now another grenade related change was made to Osmiomancy Gloves, as they had the increased seeker distance and speed reduced by 50%. Now this seems like it was mainly changed to combat the strength of cold snaps inside of PvP, but you can see it in action here, where pre-patch our cold snap lands about here at base and here with Osmiomancy Gloves, but post-patch you can see that the distance and speed were reduced quite a bit. Now wrapping things up, we have Speaker Sight. This used to be a problem in the Crucible because of the insane orb generation. Bungie quickly disabled this feature in PvP, but now have a change for it. 6 instances of healing a damaged ally in Crucible will now spawn in Orb of Power. Now let me just say, this has to be broken. We tried numerous things, but first off, the 6 instances of healing does seem to be in effect here, but once you hit that 6th instance, it keeps generating orbs every time after that, which in and itself would be more broken than before they disabled it. Now the weirdest thing about this is that no actual orbs spawn at all. You can see we have 2 point of views of this, the healer and the one being healed. It says orbs are being generated, but strangely enough, they don't seem to spawn. So definitely a broken change here, guys, that hopefully we get it fixed to in the future. Now lastly, we have our hunters. First up is Lucky Pants. This got a whole host of changes done to it. It now provides movement bonuses, including increased slide distance and sprint speed when a hand cannon is equipped. Airborne effectiveness bonus is active whenever a hand cannon is equipped, not just when the illegally modded holster buff is active. Arguably, the biggest change here is that it no longer requires the hand cannon to be matched to the super damage type or kinetic to receive the PvE damage buff. The out of luck cooldown will only trigger if you reach 7 stacks of the PvE damage buff before swapping off the weapon or time expires. And finally, the big nerf, its maximum damage has been decreased from 600% to 450%. Now, quick disclaimer, we tested this with Last Word pre-patch, and then Bungie proceeded to actually disable Last Word post-patch, but turns out the 30% increase that Bungie gave it inside of PvE is something that they're going to keep. That's right, guys. Last Word is literally a PvE weapon now, and considering its rate of fire, it pairs very nicely with Lucky Pants. Now, across the board, you are going to feel that nerf though, from 600% to 450%. That will be felt, especially for my dedicated Lucky Pants users. However, I do appreciate the flexibility of this exotic now. You no longer have to match your hand cannon to your super, or it doesn't have to be a kinetic. This is good quality of life changes, adding more fluidity to this exotic in its build crafting. Also, not activating the out of luck cooldown until you reach 7 stacks is also appreciated. But without a doubt, guys, that 600 to 450%, it hurts. It's still going to be a strong choice. People are still going to use Lucky Pants, but this exotic has definitely been reined back a bit. Next up, we have young Ahamkara's Spine. Ahamkara! This got an old nerf reverse, and it's about damn time. It now provides triple mine grenade energy on ability hits instead of final blows. Now, this has been something I know people have been asking for since the change was made about a year ago, and you can see it in action here. Pre-patch, our grenade doesn't regen any energy for landing a hit, but when we do damage post, you can see that it does. It also works the same inside of PvP. So for the many of us that stopped using these exotics a long time ago, now might be the time to break it out. Now we're going to talk about Blight Ranger and Raiju's Harness. The reason why I bring these both up together is that Blight Ranger actually inherited the traits from Raiju's Harness. Blight Ranger now has the ability to cancel your arc staff super while equipped, damaging and blinding nearby enemies, and granting a tier 4 arc weapon damage boost. Now the damage dealt by this is directly affected by the number of projectiles reflected. Now we did lose the ability to generate orbs from blocking. That's what it had previously. You can see it in action here. It was really nice for topping off supers for your teammates. Now you can see it in action that once we cancel our super, it deals damage in a radius around us that seems to be anywhere between 4 and 6 meters, and it also causes blind. Now the tier 4 arc weapon surge that you gain from this lasts for 21 seconds, which is quite a lot. Now I will say, in terms of the damage that it could put out, we did damage testing with this exotic, and it really just depends on whatever it is that you're blocking. If we're gonna have a boss down the road that consistently blows their load into us, then guys, Blight Ranger could very well be the play. But we just don't have many bosses like that. Even Greg here, who blows loads better than anybody that I know, even he gets stunned. That's right, his own attack, when reflected, can actually stun him, which in this case is disruptive to our DPS. However, I am looking for the day when Blight Ranger is going to be a go-to exotic in certain encounters. I think it's going to happen. Now let's look at Raiju's harness. This is at a complete rework, where upon activating Gathering Storm, this will call down lightning on all nearby targets, jolting them while also amplifying allies. Now, defeating arc debuff targets grants a small amount of Gathering Storm energy. Now, you can see it here as we cast Gathering Storm. Enemies around us are jolted in a similar way to Volt Shots. Now, speaking of, weapons with Volt Shots are actually perfect to pair with this exotic, since defeating arc debuffed enemies will now grant us more super energy, thus allowing us to spam more Gathering Storms. Fellas, this is an incredibly powerful exotic now. What Geomags is for Chaos Reach is exactly what Raiju's harness is for Gathering Storm. Now, last up for my hunters, we have Spirit of Synthoceps on our exotic class item. This is at its melee damage bonus reduced when both Bionic Enhancements and Stylish Executioner are active by 50%. Now, you can see here pre-patch, we hit Carl for 69,046, which is quite nice. But post-patch, we're only hitting for 33,872. A hefty nerf, guys. This will certainly impact my melee heavy hunter builds that lean into Spirit of Synthoceps and Stylish together. So guys, those are your pre and post exotic armor changes. Again, if you haven't checked out our video for the super damage, feel free to check that out. And if you haven't checked out our pre and post for exotic weapons, we also have that down below in a link as well. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.